Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
Coming up on episode 369 of Wheel Bearings, I've got the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, Can-Am Origin and Pulse, Toyota Crown Signia, Lincoln Aviator, Nissan Kicks, a giant tunnel under Toronto, Stellantis looking for a new CEO, more hybrids from Jeep and VW, a manual transmission for Honda's new hybrid Prelude, and ACMI tests Tesla's FSD, and it's not good. All that and more coming up next. This is episode 369 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Labuel-Sandwich from Guidehouse Insights.
I am Roberto Baldwin from SAE International.
And I'm Stephanie Brinley from S&P Global Mobility.
Thank you for joining us again this week, Steph.
Happy to be here.
Nicole is still riding the rails in Europe with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she'll be back next week. Yeah, let's dive into this. Robbie, last week you had something that you couldn't talk about yet.
Yeah.
I think the embargo is lifted on that now. So
it has. I can say all the things now.
Okay.
So I went, 2 weeks ago to Austin, Texas, which was like 110 degrees. Now the article I wrote for Wired says 100 degrees, but I think it was actually 110. So when you read the article and you kind of feel bad for me, you should feel a little bit extra bad. Just a little.
I was in Austin this week and it was only 93. So
yeah, so it was just, so I was riding a motorcycle, which means you're wearing a big black helmet, you're wearing your jacket, you're wearing pants, you're wearing boots, you're wearing gloves. So you're doing all that and you're like, oh, it's nice and warm out. So regardless of that, I was driving Can-Am motorcycles, which is something you couldn't say for about 37 years.
Yeah.
New Can-Am motorcycles. You could say it about old ones, but back in the 70s and like early 80s, Can-Am was, all about motocross and the other cool little Can-Am logo. And then, the company got sold and the brand got sold and it all just sort of fell apart. And then, the Japanese motorcycles came up and they were just doing better. They had more money. They were able to do more R&D and the Can-Ams just sort of fell by the wayside. Well, they're back and they're back as electric motorcycles. So they could have very easily come back as, throwing some, just regular old motorcycle engines in there and been like, hey, we're back. But nope, they decided to do the hard thing. They decided to come back with their own electric motorcycles and not just like come back like, what a lot of companies do is, buy some parts off the shelf. No, they designed and had built their motors, their battery packs, their inverters, everything. They did everything in-house, which is really, really impressive. And what's really fun is that they used to have this like rotary engine, not like a Mazda, the Wonkel, whatever, rotary engine. They had you can look it up. It's a whole thing. But the company that made it, which is part of the parent company that owns Can-Am, they made that engine for Can-Am. Well, guess who's making the electric motors? It's the same company.
Okay.
So it's Rotax, which is part of BRP, and the way I can remember that is it sounds like burp. So Rotax is building their motors out of Austria. They are but they are designed by Can-Am, and they started with a really small team. Their team is now like 200 people just on electric vehicles. The powertrain's essentially out of a snowmobile that they have that's electric, that they unveiled about a year ago, or put on sale about a year ago. It is liquid cooled, which was sort of smart considering the fact that it was 110 degrees, and that it's 110 degrees ambient temperature, and then you're just riding on black asphalt, which means you're getting all this extra heat off the ground. So it was probably about 130 where the motor and the battery were, and zero thermal fade, none.
Wow.
Nothing.
Oh.
It just felt like and we were driving these at speed, and these are essentially commuter bikes. They have a range of, hold on, where's it at in this? Man, this article is way too long. Who wrote this? They have a range of about
tall guy, I think.
190 miles. The Pulse, which is the naked bike, that's the sort of the street bike. It says it'll do about 100 miles in the city, a little bit less when you do freeway. This is especially true when you have a very tall man on this bike, with his big body just acting as a giant billboard blocking any sort of drag coefficient you may have. But they had us just riding on the freeway almost the entire time until we went off-roading. And so I got about 55 to 60 miles or 65 miles of range on the Pulse. And again, this is just not what the bike was built for. It's 55 and up 70 miles an hour for long stretches of time. And even if you live in, let's say, LA, where you are going to be commuting 30 miles to work, you could still do this. They have a level 2. They have the J1772 port, which is just the level 2 port you see on plug-in hybrids and EVs. I asked about NAC support. They said they're just going to keep an eye on, see what's happening, the evolution of EVs, blah blah blah. NACS isn't going CCS isn't going anywhere, or not CCS, but 1772 isn't going anywhere for a long time. So that's not really that big of a deal. I will say that as a tall person, the Pulse, again, this is the naked sort of just street commuter bike, is small. It's a little bit smaller than a 600cc bike. If you ride motorcycles, who it potentially fits on a 600cc bike. People usually under 6 foot tall. That said, the riding position wasn't as uncomfortable as I had anticipated it to be. My legs didn't feel uncomfortable. There was I did have a pretty substantial bend in my knee, but it didn't feel like I couldn't control the bike, where your knees are up in your chest. They were still with the bike. Torso wise, though, I do feel like I was sort of lording over the bike. This just giant torso over the top of the bike, which meant that, because you're so big and you're sort of leaning down, is you have to look down a little bit more to see their giant 10.25 inch display, which was actually really nice. It was really bright, no issues with, in the hot, insane Texas sun. There was no glare. I wear polarized sunglasses underneath with my helmet. I could still see it, no problems at all. So you don't have to worry about that. I will say, though, if you're taller, and this is sort of a thing for tall motorcycle riders, is that you end up looking at a dual sport, a DS, and they have one, and it's called the Origin. And it has a 34-inch seat height. So it actually, you have a sort of a sitting up riding stance. So it's a DS. It gets about 90 miles of range in the city, which means, as you're riding, it's going to go down if you're just hitting those sustained highway speeds. I think I got about 50 to 60 miles, give or take. Again, this is a ride program, so I don't have a chance to sort of do like a real test. I'm having to, we go and then we stop and then we're, riding here and then we go it's these programs are sort of set up to make sure that when you get somewhere, you're fine. I did get to the stop with the DS with 0 miles of range, which I was very proud of. It's always fun to just sort of go for it and just kind of yeah, this is what we're doing. Can I make it? Can I make it? And it still said it had a percent, like one red bar was left on the battery. It doesn't give you the percentage, just one red bar, but it said for range for miles, it just had the two little lines like for 0. I was like, yeah, and that was for about 5 miles. So if you do get one of these bikes, you can at least go 5 miles when the bike says, man, you should be pulling over. We took the Origin off road. It did really well. It's really nimble. Again, they're not huge bikes, which is great, especially if you're riding them in the city, where being nimble is far more important than I don't want to say than stability, but it's far more important than having a long wheelbase or big tires or big wheels. And so yeah, I could see riding either of these in like San Francisco, New York, Chicago, LA, in these sort of urban areas. What is really interesting, and electric motorcycles do have regen. Typically, you let off the throttle, and as you do that, you can on most of them you can just adjust, just like a regular car, how much regen you have as you're coming to, as you're rolling. This has an active regen, but it's not connected to the brake. It's not connected to the front brake or the rear brake. Those are still friction brakes. What it is that as you roll off, if you keep rolling forward past the neutral position, the bike will slow down. It'll add, it's an active regen, which is a really interesting way to do it, because it's still the rear tire. So typically when you stop a motorcycle, you most of your brake, just like a car, most of your braking is on your front wheel. But it's like when you're just kind of riding and you need to slow down for a corner or for a curve, or you're coming to a stop, and before you get to the point where you want to grab that brake handle, you could sort of roll onto it, and it only has like 5 to 6 degrees of movement, so there's not a lot of movement, and you can only tell that there's a difference in how far you're rolling it when you're going above like 30-40 miles an hour. If you're doing under that, it feels very binary. It's either off or on, because it doesn't have the runway in order to like let you do that. That said, it's actually, you sort of get used to using it. And what's nice is that it doesn't change the braking characteristics that if you're a rider, you've spent your entire life dealing with. Because when you change that, what happens is that you're not in a car. You're on a motorcycle. There's just
very different driving dynamics.
Yeah, there's far more safety considerations you need to take when you're riding a motorcycle, and changing that for the sake of like, hey, we did a cool thing, is sort of it's not a good idea.
So like, do you with a regular EV, when you're using regen, you roll off the accelerator pedal, and you just lift off that pedal, and you start to get some regen. Yeah. For this active regen mode on the bike, is there resistance to going into if you just let off the throttle, does it just go to that neutral position, or does it actually start to regen, or do you have to push it or roll it into that regen area?
You can do both. So you can turn, so there's the passive regen, where as you roll off to neutral, it'll start slowing down. There's off, which is nice, because if you're riding off-road, maybe you don't want that, or if you're riding on slick roads, there's minimum and then there's maximum. There's 3 settings. It's the same thing with the active regen, so you can have it on off, because if you're off-road, one of the things I realized when I was riding off-road is that sometimes when you're riding, your hand sort of, you kind of brace yourself. This is something I didn't really think about until we started riding off-road. Sometimes you brace yourself a little bit where you're pushing on the handlebars. And now when you're bracing yourself, it moves a little bit, and it's not enough to like feel like, oh no, but it is enough to feel like, oh, now I'm stopping it when I really kind of didn't want to. Right. So you can turn it off for that sort of thing. So you can have any sort of combination with those 3 regen setups. Plus you have just the friction brakes that you're just sort of used to. So you can turn everything off and just have it like, roll, just coast as you turn it off, and it coasts for, it's an EV, just coast for a while. Or you can have minimum, maximum on all those. So you can sort of set up your settings that make you feel comfortable as you're riding and for your riding environment, which I think was really important. Because I did ask him, I'm like, wait, does this active regen, or the passive regen, does it use the friction brakes? They're like, oh, no. They're like, that's a bad scene. Because, you're you're trying to do the, getting used to the brakes and having that just like additional like weirdness isn't great when you're riding. And it has anti-lock brakes, which most modern motorcycles at this point have anti-lock brakes, which is great. If you've ever ridden if you're a morning commuter, anti-lock brakes are great because a lot of times you're riding in the morning, the roads are cold, they're a little bit slick, maybe because of where you live, and people are going to pull out in front of you. That's just the nature of riding a motorcycle, especially in an urban environment. And I've had more than enough times where I'm like, someone pulls out in front of me, and then my rear tire just locks up because I'm trying not to die. That said, no, they rode really well. I enjoyed both of them. Like most electric motorcycles, there's a premium. The Pulse, this is the naked, just sort of road bike. It starts at $13.99, so $14,000. The Origin, $100 more, $14.99, so $15,000. Yeah. So or $1,000, sorry. I think if you're tall, you might as well just pay the extra money for the Origin, especially if you think if you live anywhere where there's any potential for you to go off road. You could swap out those knobby tires that are on there for the same Dunlops that are on the Pulse, so you get a little bit better a little bit better range and a little bit better stopping in rain on asphalt. They both have I believe it's an 8.9 kilowatt hour battery. They charge at 6.6 kilowatts from the level 2 charge. So it's about 20 to 80% in about 50 minutes. So you ride 100 miles. Let's say you ride 90 miles, you stop for an hour, eat lunch, whatever, and then you ride again. These are not weekend, I'm going on like, a 5-hour ride motorcycles. And to be honest, most of those there's really sort of two, as someone's been riding motorcycles for a long time, there's two types of riders. People who just ride every day, and that's what I was, especially when I lived in San Francisco. You're just every day, you're on your bike, you're going to work, you're taking care of stuff, you're doing your stuff, you're doing your life stuff. And then there are people who just ride on the weekend, and their jackets are all nice and clean. Like I always see like the big groups of bikers like during the weekend on a Saturday on the freeway, and all their gear is really clean, and my gear just looks like I've been driving through a coal mine because you're riding all the time. So and so I think for the people who are just, I have to get to work and this is my preferred means of getting there, these bikes are great. If you're the person who's like, I want to ride on the weekend, I want to feel the wind in my hair, I work hard all week, I want to go to some weird some cafe with a bunch of other bikers, I want to pretend like I live in Sons of Anarchy, or that I'm a sport bike racer or whatever for an hour, a couple, for a weekend. These are not the bikes for you. Don't. And also don't be like, oh, these bikes are worthless. I'm like, they're worthless for your use case. So yeah, no, I think, nearly 40 years of just like kind of chilling on motorcycles and then coming back. Good for them. I think it really paid off for the company to sort of do everything in-house. I mean, it's the same thing Rivian, Tesla, Lucid.
Yeah, well, they're owned by Bombardier, as is Bombardier also owns Rotax. They own Skidoo, Sea-Doo, yeah, and
all the
also,
dudes.
They also make the Challenger and Global Express business jets. So in recent years, Can-Am is mostly focused on the side-by-sides and ATVs and the three-wheelers, the Can-Am Spyders that you see around all the time. Are they planning to incorporate this electric powertrain in any of those vehicles?
You ask that question, and they're always like, "Well, we can't really." It's the sort
can't talk about future product.
Exactly. That's the. And
I don't know.
I don't know. They did have some side by sides there. They didn't let us ride them because they wanted us. It was so hot that there was concern that I was going to have heat exhaustion. Like they were taking my pulse. Mm-hmm. Like they gave us an hour on the track, like the dirt track.
Wow, yeah.
And so it was a trail. It wasn't like a big track, like a big motocross track. It was an off-road trail, which is just like, maybe 8 inches wide. And it was around trees and there were bumps and, it's very technical for a rider. And the problem with me, because of how long my legs are, my arms, and just me, is that if you stand up on a bike, it's a lot easier to do those trails. I can't stand up. I'm like hunched over like a hunchback because I'm too tall. I have to get handlebar lifts to like lift the handlebars up about 3 or 4 inches, like a substantial amount. So I'm behind somebody she like taught motocross riding, like off-road. She's like the queen and she's just tearing it up. So already 1,000 times better than I am on off-road. Because I rarely ever do anything off-road. So I'm behind her and I'm watching her. I'm like, man, I wish I was that good. But I'm riding. I'm like, oh, I'm having a nice time. But I only did like 4 laps because it was so hot. Because when you're riding on the street, you're doing, you're going fast enough where you get enough air circulation.
A little bit of a breeze at least.
Yeah, but when you're doing like, maybe 20 miles an hour, so you can do a little jump. And hope you don't fall, and but if you do fall, you always want to capture it on film or on
of
camera,
course,
on video.
Oh yeah.
And so I was I went up to somebody. I'm like, okay, I'm so hot. I'm gonna do one more, which is always a bad thing. And then I went back and they had a bunch of Can-Am made sure we didn't die. They had like essentially like a ton of towels that had just been soaking in ice water. They had water. They had a nurse. They had everything that we needed. But the nurse was like, "Why don't you sit down?" I'm like, "Okay." So the bikes were fine. Yeah. Me, on the other hand, was like, nah.
So you've ridden other electric bikes, right?
Yeah.
And how would you compare the Can-Am to the I think you've driven the Livewire and some.
I have not driven the Livewire.
Oh, you haven't driven the Livewire?
Something very weird with Harley where they're like, "Hey, we want you to ride this," and you reach out to them and they're like, and it's like radio silence. And I hear this from other people as well. I think there's maybe a bunch of turnover at Harley or now Livewire. And so I've driven most of the Zeros though. So they sort of owned and continue to sort of own the electric bike market. The first Zeros were not great motorcycles, and they know that. Zero's known that the current Zeros are very good bikes. And I think Can-Am coming out of the gate on par with what Zero is offering is pretty impressive. I think, Zero's had 10, 15 years of working on their motorcycles. Can-Am has an entire infrastructure. They're part of a much larger company, so they have access to all these other things. But that doesn't mean they're not going to. We've seen a lot of OEMs come out with EVs. You're like, oh, man, this is what you built, huh? And so Can-Am could have sort of kind of half-assed it, and they didn't. And I think it really, I hope that if you're looking at an electric motorbike, Zero and Can-Am are the two to check. Again, I haven't ridden the Livewire. I just remember it was it was incredibly expensive when it first came out.
Yeah, it was like $30,000 when it first came out.
Yeah, it was like it was over $10,000 more than the equivalent Zero. And I was like, well, these people have been making good motorcycles for a few years at that point, and now they're just good motorcycles that happen to be EVs. And just like, what are they doing? I mean, what part of Harley's ridership wants this, and B, if they aren't part of the traditional ridership, buy this when there's already another option on the market. So unfortunately I haven't ridden the Livewire, so I can't really say how well it rides and compared to the Zeros or the Can-Ams. I should probably reach out to them and see what they're doing. I have ridden the Moto Compacto, which is
those are awesome.
That is just the best. I look even far more ridiculous on that. There's a video.
I look ridiculous on that, and I'm short.
But it's so fun. You're like, I don't care. I rode it in Las Vegas in like what do you call it? One of those business centers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like they're just, I saw Honda. I went to lunch with them. They're like, hey, you want to ride the Moto Compacto in this room? And they're like, yeah, you can just ride it around. So I'm just riding around inside Las Vegas, which is the best way to do anything in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Inside.
They wouldn't let you take it all the way through the show.
They were like, if you want to ride it, I was like, no, I don't want to get you guys in trouble. They're like, yeah, we're already in trouble. We've already been yelled at a few times.
Yeah, well, at least they know what to yell at. No.
Yeah. So yeah.
Electric bikes in general, what's the take? Is it good for what it needs to be, or is it measurably better? I'm not a motorcycle rider at this point in my life.
You know, the initial ones were just like, they felt like, especially the original, like Zero was really the only company that was making electric bikes for a while. And those original bikes were sort of terrifying because they were very much just sort of cobbled together, and they felt just like really heavy mountain bikes.
Oh, geez.
And so they weren't great. And then over the years, they have evolved so quickly and so well that they're great bikes. The weird thing about motorcycles is that motorcycles aren't using that much gasoline.
They're,
you know, it's
pretty
going
efficient
anywhere.
to begin with.
They're loud and they're sort of annoying. And there was a long time, like, you couldn't get a Vespa in the United States because they're still using the 2-stroke engine, which are just, yes, it's not using a lot of gas, but it's just an insane amount of
burning just as much oil as it was gas.
Yeah,
it was burning just as much. Like, I think the Vespas, before they came back in the mid 2000s, they were gross polluters, like worse than the Hummer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's while it's not using as much gasoline, they can, some of them can be quite disgusting for the environment. And then some, just loud, and the torque, especially on this, and they did some really great work on the acceleration mapping. Is torque on a motorcycle, because motorcycles are just, they're nothing, they're just motors and a body just flying down the road. And so now you've made the motor more efficient, it has more torque, and so they can be like a lot of fun on the road. And there is Zero does have a bike that I wouldn't, unless you've been riding for at least 5-10 years, I wouldn't, like the FXS. I would not give that to somebody who hasn't been riding in a long time. So there are like, because it's just so much, there's like 75 pounds of torque on a bike that weighs like 200 and something pounds, and your body. And, if you're not careful, you just flip it. You're just going to flip the bike. So there are some like really cool things. And it's the idea of going off road on a bike and not hearing is, to me, is kind of cool, because it's kind of like the same sort of you get with the 4xe, the Wrangler 4xe, where you're like, I'm off road and I can hear what's going on. I can hear you can hear animals, things aren't running away.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things that with Can-Am, when we were on this off-road trip, there's all these cows around, and they didn't run away because we weren't making any noise. We were just riding around. And so that was kind of cool. Whereas I guess they were there earlier in the week, and it was open to the public, and there was all these people there with their regular motorcycles, and all the animals were gone. Like, they weren't anywhere near where everyone was riding, because it's loud, it's annoying. Loud. You're a cow. You're like, I don't care that you can do a whoop-de-doo. It's an interesting sort of setup. I do like the way the electric bikes ride. I do think if you're still someone who likes to do like a long weekend trip, like occasionally I'll get like, a Ducati in or whatever, and I'll do a long ride with like a friend of mine. It's you're like, okay, well, if we're going to do more than 100 miles, then this electric bike doesn't work. But if I can go like 300 miles, that's great. So, I think motorcyclists, a lot of them are a bit like people with tattoos. You get one, and then you look at our people with guitars, and you're like, well, maybe I'll just get another one.
Yeah. Anyway.
Like guitars, tattoos, and motorcycles. All the things your parents told you not to buy. Don't be a musician. Don't get tattoos. Well, not everyone has tattoos. If you don't have tattoos, you're the weird one. And the motorcycles. No, I really like the Can-Am, the Origin, and the Pulse. They're going to production this year and should be available to put in your driveway in early 2025.
Cool.
That's very cool.
Well, might have to learn how to ride a bike.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, go take classes. Don't let your friend teach you how to ride a motorcycle. I didn't.
Oh, I would never do that.
I've been riding motorcycles since I was 5. When my wife wanted to get her license, I made sure not to teach her anything, because I probably have a bunch of bad
habits.
Yeah, bad habits. And I took the class as well. We didn't take it at the same time, but I also took the same class. Just to like, I've been doing this wrong for 2 decades, 3 decades. Well, that's great. because my parents just put me on a motorcycle. I don't know
So
why.
here's the throttle, here's the brake, here's the clutch, go.
Yeah, that was it. It was the late 70s, early 80s. There were no rules or laws. You just threw children on electric thing on gas powered things, and well, I'll see you in 5 hours. Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
So yeah, take a class. I'm a big fan of taking a class. Get your license, and gear. Wear your gear, because
the right gear. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be safe.
Even if helmets are not required in your state, wear a helmet.
Yeah.
And you know what? People occasionally, someone will be like, "I can't believe you're wearing like a full face helmet for." I own a Vespa 250, which I love because it's got tiny wheels and you're super nimble riding around, and but they're like, "I can't believe you're wearing a full face helmet." And when I'm riding, when like a bolt hits that shield or rock, I'm like, that's why I wear a full face helmet.
Yep.
Yeah, you can still see. Yeah.
Where big fly right in the eye.
I ran into 2 butterflies on this ride in Austin, and I was using their sort of full face helmet, which I didn't really like. It didn't fit my head right. That's the other thing. I should have brought my helmet, and I didn't. And so they had helmets for us, and they were new helmets, and my head is weird apparently, because it kept smashing down my glasses. I have a really big head, and so it was. But yeah, I had 2 butterflies.
Like it, but you don't fit. The helmet or the bike.
yeah, the helmet didn't. Yeah, I hated the helmet, and I told him I don't like this helmet, and the guy was like, I don't like it either.
Yeah, it's just a catch up, right?
Yeah. So wear gear, take classes, get your license, and remember that everyone's trying to kill you. That's riding motorcycles.
Yeah,
it's been so long. I mean, I was a kid.
On a bike, you can stop a lot faster than a car can. So
yeah. Just and it's really it's unfortunate that as people get more and more smartphones in their cars and displays and all that don't make sense, that have information that are out of your eye line, it gets a little bit scarier riding a motorcycle around. We're fortunate in the Bay Area because a lot of people ride, so everyone sort of expects motorcycles. It's when you live in an area where a lot of people don't ride, so people don't expect motorcycles. That's when it gets a little
plus
little dicey.
In California, I think people who drive in California regularly are also used to motorcyclists lane splitting, which is legal in California.
Oh yeah.
So you're always even when you're stuck in traffic, you're on the lookout for checking your mirrors, hopefully checking your mirrors periodically for motorcycles that are, coming down between you and the car next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know people are going to be like, oh, it's so dangerous. I'm like, man, it's because motorcycles are so thin, people rear end motorcycles constantly because the depth perception isn't there that they would have for a regular car. So lane splitting is actually safer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally, every once in a while, you'll have someone who's trying to pull out in front of you. People are like, what about someone opens the door? No one's ever opened the door on me on the freeway or in the city. But you try, motorcycling does attract a certain mindset where you think you're a god and you'll live forever and you're going to lane split at 70. That's not me. I know how people think because of cars, but it does make you a better driver because you get the sixth sense of how people drive that you don't get from driving a car. Like I can be driving a car and know that person is going to pull out in front of me. I just know. And it's just like those little micro movements that they're doing while they're driving that I've picked up from riding a motorcycle forever.
Yeah.
Especially in like a busy urban environment. So you sort of like pick up on weird little cues of how people drive before they do something dangerous, that you anticipate that they're going to do something dangerous. And so it's really, if you want to be a better driver, motorcycles are great.
Huh. I'll think about it.
Talking to everyone in the motorcycles. It's the motorcycle show.
It's a motorcycle show, yeah.
They got wheels and bearings. So.
It works, It's not. It doesn't say car show. It's transportation show. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course, the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. We've updated the Wheel Bearings merch store, and now there's a whole bunch of new choices, new colors, new styles, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, travel mugs, stickers, aprons, tote bags, you name it. You can get your Wheel Bearings merch at shop.wheelbearings.media. Go check it out. That's shop.wheelbearings.media. All right, Steph, what have you been driving?
It's been an interesting week. I've had a couple of cars, partially because the Lincoln Aviator came and visited me for about 4 days. And I had the swap between a couple. So I liked the Aviator's got a facelift and a minor change for this year. But the biggest change is in the interior and getting the latest infotainment and the latest digital system for Lincoln. Of course, the difference between the Lincoln Aviator version of the latest infotainment system and, for example, the Lincoln Nautilus that went on sale earlier this year and the Lincoln Navigator that are coming later in the year is the Aviator sticks with the two-screen setup and doesn't have the big, pillar-to-pillar, coast-to-coast screen environment that the other two have, but it's the same background system behind it. So your graphics are really great. And the response time for all the Google Assistant is really good. All of that was terrific, and it worked really well. It's big and it's comfortable. Liked a lot about it, but I felt like this one. I felt like in spite of the fact of being kind of a carryover transmission or carryover powertrain, The suspension, the transmission didn't seem to shift when I sort of expected it to, and it held it a little longer sometimes. Even didn't matter what mode I was in. And I think the auto hold feature kind of slows it up. It felt very laggy from the start too, which was interesting because this wasn't, they had a plug-in hybrid, and the plug-in hybrid used to do that, but this wasn't the plug-in hybrid because they don't have that anymore. So it was efficient and it was useful, and you kind of got used to it, but it wasn't as smooth as I really wanted it to be. And I'm struggling with Ford's Blue Cruise, honestly, and at least in my part of the world. Whenever I have it, it likes to disengage a lot. And I found that happened again. And I feel like I'm on a pretty good stretch of road in general, kind of going from Detroit north on 75. And there's some curves in there around one stretch that it doesn't like. But there's other points where, between a little bit where it's a sunny road, it's a sunny day, and there's not a curve. And it's just like, you should grab now.
Is that when you're driving into the sun?
Your turn to drive.
Both. It was both into. It was because it was into and out. And there was one time I put a decent amount of highway driving on it this particular week, but there was one day too where the traffic was just heavier. So you've got 4 lanes, not quite bumper to bumper, 4 lanes going along at the speed limit, if a little bit higher. So not really tense traffic, but all 4 lanes had cars in it. It was like, no, I feel like this is too complicated. I don't really want to. No, you need to grab. And so I felt like it disengaged a lot. And so I was getting frustrated because I was watching for it to disengage. And so for me and that experience, it negated everything that it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make it more easy. It's supposed to make you more relaxed a little bit. Not necessarily not pay attention to the road, but when you get done, feel like there was a little bit less load and feel like you're more relaxed when you get to your destination. That was not happening. I was like, Blue Cruise.
But the ad I just saw on television told me.
I know. It says it's amazing. And there's still, it's always a work in progress. And there's still, this was 1.3, there's a 1.4 version that might address some of the things. I struggle with a number of automakers who, whether it's adaptive cruise or if it's a level 2 plus or a level 2, they've all decided that they need to, be smarter than you. And there's a curve on a freeway that's designed to go like the speed that you're going. But they're like, yeah, no, it's a curve. We're just gonna drop the speed for you, just in case, just because it's curvy.
Just in case,
Just because we feel like doing that. So you're cruising down on the left lane, and the curve comes up, and the car's like, yeah, I feel like you should be going 7 miles an hour slower. So it makes you do that. The rest of the traffic's not. So they're all like, what's going on here? And everybody's scrambling to pass you, and I feel like they're not. A lot of them are still a little bit clunky. And this particular, my experience, at least with Blue Cruise in the last week or so, was that it slowed me down more than I thought it should. It was pretty aggressive about it, and I found it a little bit frustrating. Not all the systems slow down quite as much. Some of them slow down 2 or 3 miles an hour, which I'm not convinced that it's really making me safer, but at least it's more gradual and it's not freaking out the rest of the traffic. It's just a little lift, not really a full slowdown. So that's something I kind of struggle with. And it brings me to mind too, though, that I think when we talk about Blue Cruise and we talk about Super Cruise and Hyundai's HDA Assist and all of these, they're really like location specific. I've been on Ford.
There's times when they work really well, and there's
really
times when they don't.
Yeah, and right now, I'm in an area where Blue Cruise just. I 2 or 3 months ago had a Mustang Mach-E and was kind of saying the same thing. I'm like, come on, it's sunny outside. There is no weather. There's not very heavy traffic. What's happening here? Why can I suddenly not use this system? So that I'm going to say is partially regional specific, but I do find Blue Cruise to be a little bit more of a disengaging factor, which then makes you not necessarily that I don't trust the system, but I'm if I'm driving 30 miles and I'm, it's disengaging every 4 or 5 or 6 miles, then I might as well do it myself.
Kind of pointless.
Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah. I still, as much as we've worked with all of these systems, all of us on this podcast, I do like GM Super Cruise system better. But I do still wonder if I would actually pay for it. Which is interesting because Ford is I believe bundling in Lincoln now for several years, 3 to 4 years when you're Blue Cruise.
I think it's 3 years.
I think it's 3 years. So now Ford's been doing Blue Cruise for 4 years or so. So I kind of wonder where that is. I wonder if they're seeing people not really necessarily being willing to step up to it yet. So you want to kind of convince people to do that. I think pricing is still something people haven't decided if they want to spend or not. I know I'm in that camp. For sure. My commute's not super long. But so I'm always struggling. Do I really, I check it out on every car that I have, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to spend money on that for myself. So Aviator overall, pretty good. Lincoln's pricing is the top end is always kind of eye-watering. This one starts, I was starting, the one that I was in was a black label, so it was one of the expensive ones. But the Lincoln Aviator in general starts with $58,880. The next trim level up is $68,000, and then the black label is $88,000. And I love the black labels because they're beautiful. The interiors are outstanding, and they're really, really nice. But 58,
and we're waiting for that but
$30,000 between the standard car and the black label, and you're like, is it that good? Or even go mid range, and it feels like a bit of sticker shock. And then I start thinking, what do you do with $88,000? There's a lot of choice out there. And that's not to say the Aviator is a bad choice, but you really have opened up a huge range of 3-row, electric, 2-row. Look, where are you going to go with this? There's a lot of choice out there, and I think it's a little bit more difficult for Lincoln to stand out at that price point. And that I think is a little bit of a struggle that they have with some of the products. But one of the other car that I have right now is a Crown Signia. I said it right. Toyota has a Crown Signia, which I think a lot of us have said we keep calling it Insignia because that's just the easier word, and it's the word that you know.
That's you thinking. You're like, oh, yeah.
I'm like, Crown Insignia. No, wait. No, it's a Signia. Let's drop 2 letters and keep going. No.
Well, because they could get a trademark on Signia. They couldn't get a trademark on Insignia.
Yeah, someone else probably has that.
And it's a Toyota Crown, and so it's kind of like Toyota Camry. Like people just say they have a Crown. Like once they've got it in their driveway, I don't think they're gonna worry that much about what they call it. But in general, it's a good Toyota. The infotainment system works really well. It's comfortable. It does everything that it's supposed to do. The price is pretty reasonable. The hybrid's pretty noisy. It's kind of my thing with this. And I like it better than the Crown sedan just because the package is better. We've touched on this a little bit earlier too. The wagons, the SUV package is nice, but I'm not loving it that much. I'm like, okay, you're nice, you're reasonably priced, you'll do the job, but wow, let's like, okay,
yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. It's nice. If anybody, a Toyota buyer comes in and goes, I want the quality and I want this, they'll be fine. They'll love it. It's lovely and
the average buyer of a car like this is probably not going to be a lead foot.
No, yeah.
Because I hear what you're saying about the noise of the powertrain, and the Toyota hybrid system. If you really get on the accelerator, it doesn't matter if it's a Prius or a Crown or anything else. It revs up to 4,000 RPM and sits there until the vehicle catches up to that speed and then starts varying the engine speed. And those Toyota 4-cylinders, they're reliable. They'll run forever, but they're generally not the most pleasant engines to listen to.
No. Yeah. So, and you're right. A lot, you really, if you just baby it a little bit more, it's much less noisy. And the power level on it is perfectly sufficient for what it needs to do. There is nothing about it that you think, oh, I don't quite have enough, and you've got the efficiency for it. So it's a good little all-round product. For somebody who just wants something they can count on and rely on and put people in and put stuff in. it's really quite lovely in that way.
Not so little either.
Well, yeah, exaggerate little, but
Yeah.
It's an interesting looking car. There's a few in my neighborhood, and you're just like, oh, okay.
it is.
It's like a pole. It's like the gas Polestar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I as we're talking, I can look out the window of my driveway and I'm looking at it, and I'm even with the car. I'm not sitting above the car. I'm not sitting below the car, and I'm like, it looks better in the pictures. When you're sitting above, all the pictures look really great. Like I'm looking at this thing outside, going, I'm at eye level with the nose, and it's a little perplexing from that angle. But most people aren't sitting there staring at the car while they're talking on a podcast. So
Yeah. To your comments about the Ford Blue Cruise. Yeah, it's coming up on 7 years now since I first drove Super Cruise when they launched it in 2017. And I got to say, my most recent experience with Blue Cruise a couple of months ago on a Mach-E was, the Super Cruise I drove 7 years ago is still better than what Blue Cruise is today. I haven't tried the version 1.4 that they just announced a couple of days ago. They haven't started. I don't think they've started pushing that out to any of the cars yet. But it's too inconsistent. Yeah. And Toyota does have that predictive speed assist. They don't have a hands-free system yet on those vehicles, but they're using the camera and the map to look for curves ahead, and it'll slow you down. And like you said, it doesn't slow you down as aggressively as Blue Cruise does. But there are times when it'll drop 2, 3, 4 miles an hour as you're going into a curve. And what my own experience has been, okay, that's reasonable, going through that curve. And it's not too annoying to other drivers.
Right. When it's just a couple, but I found Blue Cruises and actually, as much as I like Hyundai, Genesis, Kia and a lot of what they do, but their predictive, I think, is a little aggressive as well.
Yeah.
I think that could be settled down just a little bit. But, this is a relatively new, not brand new, but it's a relatively new bit of software and technology that'll get better over time too. I mean, the first adaptive cruise control was really scary, so that's something that can evolve, right?
Yeah.
What's going on?
You just take off, like as soon as the car would move out of the way, the car would just like full accelerate, full throttle. We're going for it. You're like, we're gonna die.
Right. Well, it took a long time to learn that you wanted to trust that it would actually not hit the car in front of you, right? Like, is it really going to slow down enough? And it took a while for me to trust those, but those have gotten better. And some of this predictive curve stuff will get better and better. And Blue Cruise is going to continue to get better and better. It is really good about the way that it communicates. The message that you get to the driver, even if it's turn on, even if it's grab its steering wheel, all of those things are really strong. And the interaction with the driver for the automatic lane change is really quite good as well. You can tell what it's doing. You can tell when it's going to be done, and it's all that communication is right there. And GM and Ford are both really good at that. One of the differences between the system, as we know, is GM can do an automatic lane change where it realizes the traffic ahead of you is going slow, and it's got an opportunity. It'll decide. You can cancel it, but it'll decide that's a good idea to pass. And right now, Ford and Lincoln's system, you have to initiate the lane change, but it'll do it for you.
Yeah, it'll prompt you in the cluster and say, "Hey."
Sometimes,
There's not, it's clear. If you want to do a lane change, and you just tap the turn signal stock, and then it'll do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, cool. All right. Anything else on the Crown Signia or the Aviator?
That was the big things about those two.
Okay.
I mean, I think I'm wrapping those up.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
Well, I had the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, which is the fun version, the more fun, even more fun version of the Ioniq 5. I've always liked driving the Ioniq 5, and all of the eGMP models from Hyundai Motor Group across the Genesis, Kia, and Hyundai lineups. And last year at the LA Auto Show, they officially took the wraps off the 5N. So it's their first electric N model. And this is the quickest of all of the eGMP cars. So they've done some unique things on this one, that, or at least unique to the Hyundai Motor Group. When talking to the head of the N brand at LA last year, I asked him, it's like, why are you doing this? And he said, well, for performance, people are driving quickly, especially if they're taking the car to a track day. Mm-hmm. They like having all of the feedback that they get from internal combustion vehicles. So that means engine sounds, the shifting, the shift feel, and everything, because there's so much when you're driving fast. There's so much going on so quickly that you're not necessarily able to take in everything from your eyes. So you're also relying on your other senses, your seat of the pants, your ears, what you can hear, what you can feel. And so what they've done on this car is in the N mode, it can emulate different engine sounds. And when you put it into N mode, the cluster display changes, and it actually shows you a digital tachometer, which of course is typically meaningless in an EV, especially an EV that only has one gear. But it shows you, a simulated tachometer, and then it starts to make noise inside the cabin. You don't actually hear any of this noise on the outside of the car, but so it's unlike the Dodge Charger Daytona, which makes a ton of noise on the outside of the car to let everybody else know what you're driving. This actually just makes the noise primarily just on the inside of the car. And there's 3 different modes. There's one that sounds like a 4-cylinder turbo N engine, like you get in the Veloster or Elantra N. And then there's also one that sounds kind of like a jet engine, and another one that sounds like a rocket. And I had a chance to drive the 5N back in May at the Mama Spring Rally at Road America, and did a lap around Road America with the N mode turned on. And it actually really does make a difference when you're driving. It's actually not necessarily the fastest way to drive the car, but it is the most fun. Because the other thing it does is, besides the sounds, the paddles on the back of the steering wheel, which normally are used to manage the amount of regen you're getting. So you can use the left paddle to increase the regen, the right paddle to decrease the regen. When you put it into N mode, it does simulated shifting. So every time you shift, it actually gives you a slight torque interruption, like you would get with an engine when you're shifting gears, like when you're declutching. It's just momentary, and that's why it's actually not as quick to drive in N mode as it is in just the standard mode. But it's actually it's very engaging. It's there's a slight bit of uncanny valley there, but not much. And so I had a blast with it at Road America, and I had a blast with it driving it around here, taking it out on some back roads and just bombing around with this thing. And I was hearing the engine sounds. I was feeling the shifts, even though nobody else around me, so I wasn't annoying the people who lived alongside this road with all the noise, like I was in the car I was driving this morning, which was totally not electric. But we'll talk about that one next week. So the 5N, under normal circumstances, 601 horsepower, 545 foot-pounds of torque. There's a bunch of buttons on the steering wheel. There's 2 different N buttons. One is the N mode for the sounds and the simulated shifting. I've can't remember what the other one is for now off the top of my head. And then there's the NGB button, the orange NGB button, which is for N-Grin Boost, which bumps it up from 601 horsepower to 641 horsepower and 568 foot-pounds of torque. So in N-Grin Boost mode, and some of the others like the Kia EV6 GT and the Genesis GV60 Performance, they also have, a boost mode, but they don't go, this is the most powerful out of all of the variants that are available right now anyway. So if you're not in N mode, but you turn on the boost mode, so there's no simulated shifting, the 5N will go from 0 to 60 in 3.25 seconds, which is actually quicker than the car I was driving this morning, which cost about 4.5 times as much and makes a lot more noise.
Yeah.
So this is a really fast car, probably faster than most people need. Personally,
it is the end though. Like there is very much a
right.
Then beyond that, it's got all of the other wonderful traits of the Ioniq 5. It's remarkably roomy. Last Saturday, we took it. Took the dogs, and I loaded in my paddleboard and a bunch of other stuff, and we, because it was like probably the last really nice day, of late summer, early fall. It was 83 degrees. We took them out, went out to the lake. There was lots of room in there. We had my wife and I and our daughter and 2 dogs and plenty of room for everybody. No crowding at all. And just had a great time with this thing. There's a big cargo area in the back. There's a tiny little front trunk, which is good enough to store your charging cable, if you take that along with you.
Oh, that's where I can put my charging cable. I'm like, what am I going to put up there?
Yeah, just put charging cable in there.
I'm like a laptop. What can I put up there?
Yeah, you can fit your charging cable in there.
There we go.
But in the cargo capacity, with the second row seats up, 26 cubic feet, 59 cubic feet with the seats folded down. So, everything that's good about the standard Ioniq 5 you get with this, plus a lot more performance and some noise, and simulated shifting. Still charges really fast. I took it to my local EA charger. I'd come back from an appointment, and I had to leave for the airport in a few hours. And so I stopped off at my local EA station. I had preconditioned it. It didn't charge at the usual 235 kilowatts. I only peaked at about 202. But the thing is, it was still going 200 kilowatts at 65% state of charge.
Wow.
Which, almost no other vehicles will do. I mean, that's something that's pretty much unique to the Hyundai Group vehicles. So, it'll do the 10 to 80% charge in 18 minutes. It's a great car to drive. Let's see, the range on the 5N, because it's got these Pirelli P0 tires. The 5N does get a slightly larger 88 kilowatt hour battery, which is going to be also available on all the 2025 models that are coming out this fall. But because of the bigger tires, the bigger brakes that are on this thing, the EPA range is only 221 miles. And I was not necessarily driving it in the most efficient manner, but I was still getting 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour average over, even with, highway driving at speeds. So
there was a number there.
Yeah. So, if you drive it, what I was actually, the efficiency I was actually getting, I think this 221 is probably a little underrated. I think, getting 250 with the 5N is very reasonable. I think you could, if you're driving it sanely, you can easily get 250 miles of range, which is plenty. And then let's see the price tag. Let me find the right tab here. The one that I drove had the was finished in the performance blue matte paint. So this is the same blue that Hyundai's, it's been the signature color of Hyundai N for the last few years since they launched those. This is the first Hyundai N model I've had, though, that didn't have the seat belts in this color. So it just had regular black seat belts, which I thought was a little odd. But the exterior looked fantastic in this matte blue. It's a light blue color. It looks really good. And then you've got some little orange accents and some black on the front and the rocker panels, and then the big wheels on here. So looked really good. And also, this was the first Ioniq 5 that came equipped with a rear window wiper. So when it rains, that's going to be standard on all the 2025 models that they're going to be building. They're already building in Korea, and they're going to be building in Georgia in the next few weeks. So they've gone back. They've decided to go back and add that wiper back on there after a lot of complaints from customers.
I don't have it on my Hyundai Ioniq 5, and yes, it's annoying.
Yeah. The sports seats were really comfortable. Minimal adjustments. Basically fore aft height and rear seat back angle, and it's all manual adjustments. But it worked. Worked great. So I really like this car. It's all in with delivery charge, $68,495.
But that's a lot of power.
That's a lot of performance. 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. This is if you want a performance car, there's not a whole lot of cars that are going to go faster than this.
Yeah. I'm just pulled up to Monroney for the car we have. It's $50,000 for our just rear wheel drive, long range Hyundai Ioniq, like SEL. So you're getting all wheel drive plus a supercar just crammed in there.
Yeah, pretty much.
And even my most cynical automotive journalism friends love this car. They like the sounds, like everything. They're like, this is the most fun I've had an EV. They're like these are people who I was like, oh, they're going to be rolling their eyes the entire time. They're just giddy as children.
Well, that's the thing.
I still haven't driven it.
Yeah.
Still angry about it. And again, my own fault.
I haven't driven that one yet either. So as we talk about the Ioniq N being so much fun as a performance car, I'm thinking about this Signia still. And if you look at sort of the pricing of the standard Ioniq 5 and the size in terms of the interior space, you could get an Ioniq 5 for Signia money, and why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
there's so much room. We took this weekend. We took both of our dogs, and one of them's a big German Shepherd. The other one's just a small German Shepherd. And just like our stuff, and went on a little holiday up in Northern California. And I keep forgetting how big the car is because it's a trick. Because the wheels are so far out.
When you look at it in isolation, it doesn't look huge.
Yeah,
no, it does not. And that I've said it before. That's something that my brain is still trying to work through, that proportion difference between an EV and an ICE. Wheels all the way out to the center. The wheelbase is huge. The overall length is a lot of times shorter than what you would have in the segment. And it's I'm like, how big is that really?
Yeah, it's a trick. But the flip side is that it has the turning radius of like an F-150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
Can I
compared to another car but the car you think you're in, which is a smaller car, it is not the car you think you're in.
And I like smaller cars. So I'm like, hey, that looks really cool. It doesn't look like it's that big. And then I look up the specification and I'm like, nope, it's big. It's really big.
Yeah.
It's big.
It's big, but it's not huge. I think it's small, shorter than the Crown Signia, certainly a lot shorter than the Aviator.
Probably like 2 inches. Yes, it's a lot shorter than the Aviator.
The
Aviator's
packaging,
headroom was not great either.
Yeah,
Which surprised me in a car this size. But
this thing, it has a ton, and this is true of most of the eGMP cars. Amazing packaging. The GV60 is probably the only one that is more normal in terms of its interior volume, just because of the way it's shaped.
Mm-hmm.
But this and the EV6 and the EV9, and presumably the new Ioniq 9 that's coming, in I think at around LA time in November. Fantastic interior packaging. Flat load floor because it's electric. Flat floor in the rear, so three adults can sit in the rear seat of this thing reasonably comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Or an adult and two dogs. And so it's
that flat floor I find is like we talk about it all the time. Oh, there's a flat floor, so there's more room. But you really kind of have to be in there and sitting in there before you realize how much more that a couple of inches actually makes and living with it. And part of it is just, your feet are flat on the floor. It's just a more comfortable place to sit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ergonomically feels better. So the interior feel is outsized compared to the actual numbers that it gives you. Which again is one of those things that just more and more experience with EVs will help people learn that it's more than the numbers. The interior packaging is quite amazing.
Yeah,
it's weird. Is like I keep forgetting how big it is, and we have like a little almost like a little. We have something in the back seat so the dogs aren't sitting directly on the because they go in the water, they get sand, and so it comes up and it attaches to the front seats as well, and so it's like a little hammock. And the space between the rear seat and the front seat, even though I have the seat all the way back, it's still like I'm like, oh, I can shove more things in here because it's flat all the way across. I'm thinking like coolers in there, and I'm like, oh, I keep forgetting how much room is in this car. It's pretty, yeah. I really dig it, but I wish I had Ioniq 5N money, but I don't.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask for a raise, I guess, this year. I don't know. We'll see how that.
Or get a used one in a couple of years. When the lease runs out on your current 5, just get a used one.
Yeah, that's dare to dream, living the dream there.
Because the upside and downside of EVs is that the depreciation is terrible on most of them, and so you can get some screaming deals on used EVs. Like I've occasionally look at Auto Trader to see what's out there for the Kia EV6. You can find a 2-year-old EV6 with like 20,000 miles on it for like $27,000.
It's so crazy because it doesn't really make sense.
I know,
because people think the batteries are they're not.
Yeah.
There's degradation of all batteries, but it's not as bad as everyone anticipated. And
in 20,000 miles, it's not going to be degraded.
Yeah, you got nothing. That's nothing.
And you still got 80,000 or 8 years or 7 years on the warranty, right?
Yeah.
5 years. If it's 2 years old, you've got 5 years and another 80,000 miles on the warranty.
Yeah, you're good. You're going to be just fine. Yeah, the 2 year. Yeah, we one of my bosses was like, I'm thinking about getting an EV, and I was showing him all the like really good deals, lease deals. And then I was like, well, look at these prices for the used one.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you should probably just get a used one because then you just have it at the end.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy who wants cool new things.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So earlier this week, I had a chance to drive the 2025 Nissan Kicks. Have either of you driven it?
I had a cold earlier, so I did not go to that event this week, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm feeling better.
Is it still rad? Is it still the best Nissan?
Yeah, actually. It's a little more.
The Kicks.
It's a little more than it was.
It's cheap. Like everything you're getting, you're like, this is actually a really good. This is a screaming deal, and it's
not quite as cheap as it was. Because
but it's standard all-wheel drive now, right?
It's not standard. It's available.
Not standard,
so previously, you could only get the Kicks was based on the Versa platform, so it was front-wheel drive only. The 1.6 liter engine, which was perfectly adequate for a daily commuter.
It's the Kicks,
yeah.
It always looks cool.
And when it started, when they launched it, it was like $18,500. It was under $20,000, well under $20,000. Even that you could get the base model even with delivery for under $20,000.
Yep.
Yeah. It had that fun door that was just a piece of plastic and then a hole for the handle. That was it. Well, this is just they didn't even try, but I still love this car.
Yeah. So the new Kicks, is they've kind of gone a slightly different direction. It's basically a replacement for both the old Kicks and the Rogue Sport, which we no longer have. So size-wise, it's actually in between those two. So it's a little bigger than the old one. And it's got more power. It's now got a 2-liter engine in there, 2-liter 4-cylinder, 141 horsepower, 140 foot-pounds of torque. Its front-wheel drive is standard. It's available with all-wheel drive if you want it. It's got lots of cool stuff in there now. So they've got a 12-inch center touchscreen, and then the base model, the S trim, has I think an 8-inch instrument cluster display. The SV and SR have the 12-inch instrument cluster display. You get there's on the SV and SR, it's got wireless Android Auto and CarPlay. Strangely, the S trim does not offer CarPlay or Android Auto anymore.
That's okay.
Because it's an older
thing.
Yeah.
What? How old is this infotainment?
Yeah.
They're like, we found some Windows NT machines. They were just sitting around.
Yeah. So you can't get CarPlay or Android Auto on the base S trim. You have to step up to the SV or SR to get that. The S trim level starts at $21,830 now. So almost $22,000. So with delivery, you're looking at $23,000 as the starting price. So that's quite a bit more expensive than it used to be.
So is everything else, right?
Yeah. And, the loaded SR with all-wheel drive is $27,680. So with delivery, you're looking, almost $29,000, which, is still, by today's standards, is still relatively affordable. But it's not quite the screaming deal that the old.
It's
Kicks
not
were.
in the spirit of the Kicks, is what I'm saying.
No, in a lot of ways, it's closer to what the Rogue Sport was than the Kicks.
It reminds me of Chevrolet Trax pricing.
Yeah. I mean, it is very competitive with Trax and the Buick Envista and a bunch of other stuff. But and a Honda HR-V, but it's it's not the real deal that the old one was, which is unfortunate. But it is what it is. And the the styling, it looks much, I think it definitely looks better than the old one.
Yeah.
It's a little more not rugged looking, but a little boxier, a little more SUV-ish than the old Kicks. And the design, especially the front end, is kind of in fitting with the direction that Nissan's going with some of their other stuff. So it's got elements of the Aria in there with the front signature lighting. It's the back seat. It's definitely much roomier than the old Kicks. It's got 4-wheel disc brakes now. And I got to spend about an hour driving it around. It's definitely a significant improvement, in pretty much every way except pricing. I say the back seat's roomier, the cargo area is a little bigger. It's got a little more performance. It's still not it's not a speed demon. 140 horsepower. The one that I drove was an SR with all-wheel drive. So it's the heaviest version. I think if you went with with S or the front wheel drive S or SV, you'd be a little bit better, slightly better performance. But if you live somewhere with winter weather conditions, you may want the all wheel drive, which you couldn't get on the old Kicks. So it's definitely a better vehicle all around. It's just not quite what it used to be. Yeah,
a little different personality, a little different mission in life, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't. The old one was cheap, and in many ways, it kind of felt that way. But because it was so inexpensive, you didn't really care that it was all hard plastics.
You're like, you could throw things at it. You didn't care.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this one's a little bit more boxy and a little bit more in line with current styling, where the other one was just a little bit more in your face and a little bit like, I'm just going to have fun.
Yeah.
And so
it was more basic.
It was more basic, but it looked fun. and this one is a little bit less basic and looks nice.
Yeah.
So maybe some of the personality is gone more so than the pricing being an issue. And maybe it's the personality is just settled down enough that it's less exciting.
Yeah.
It's no longer in a ska band.
Yeah.
Now it's in like the orchestra.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
Yeah, it's fine. But there's a lot more. It stood out a little bit more.
Break it up.
In the ska band.
So that was my first experience. Like I said, I had about an hour with it on the road. It was, drives fine. Ride quality's decent. It's still got a CVT in there, so it's not gonna get you real excited, but it's good, solid, basic transportation. And if you need something, that has some decent cargo space and will work well in wintertime, this the all-wheel drive version will meet your needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. Next up. So we, traffic. Nobody likes traffic, and I don't know if either of you. Well, I mean, Robbie, you drive around San Francisco all the time. The traffic's terrible.
Yeah, no one likes traffic except for podcasters like us, because now you're just stuck there. So what else are you gonna do? Listen. No, it's not great.
Traffic around Detroit's not as bad. Traffic in Toronto is really bad. And the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, brother of the late Rob Ford, who was formerly the mayor of Toronto and got caught doing coke and other stuff. Anyway, he's got a proposal. The Highway 401, which runs across the Greater Toronto area, actually runs all the way across Ontario from Windsor all the way into Quebec. In the Toronto area, it's 18 lanes wide, and traffic is still insane. So
induced demand, people. You're not making it better.
So he wants to make it better by building a 34-mile tunnel underneath the 401 to accommodate more traffic.
There's nothing that could go wrong there.
No.
Yeah, that doesn't seem. That's so much money.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't Boston have that tunnel that, was 10 years?
The Big Dig.
The Big Dig is 10 years over budget, over time, and God knows how much over budget. I don't know that it's fixed Boston's traffic, has it?
No, not at all. Not as far as I'm aware.
And traffic in town is as bad as it is on the highway. So I'm not sure.
And so they've dedicated $19 billion to this project, which means that if they move forward with it, it will probably cost at least $50 billion, if not more.
Yeah.
So did they not have like a light rail system or buses in this?
Yeah,
they have buses. They have rail. Toronto's got a great subway system. Mm-hmm. There's the GO train, which runs from Hamilton all the way across to like Oshawa or somewhere. So there's lots of alternatives. And
along this route as well. I'm sorry, I don't know much about Toronto at all. I don't think I've been to Toronto. I don't know. I'm not even sure if I've ever been to Toronto.
I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, which is 40 miles west of Toronto.
Okay, so you know way more than I do.
Yeah.
So is there like on this stretch of road, is there not? There's alternatives for people to like get around.
Yeah.
They just love to drive.
Apparently.
Man, that's man.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts.
Like we're just gonna put more lanes, but underground.
Yeah. Stack them.
Just gonna stack them. All right. I mean, they have. The thing is, people are like, because Elon's like, why don't we have people drive underground? I'm like, have you been to Germany? There's tons of freeways that go underground.
Yeah.
Like you go like, oh, we're gonna go under this city to get through because we don't want to destroy these buildings that have been here since like the year 800 or something weird.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna go.
This is just gonna go underneath an existing 18-lane wide highway.
18 lanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What is like? I'm very curious about like where is everyone going?
I have no idea.
Such a weird 18 lanes. Wow.
Yeah.
Good job, I guess.
Yeah.
34-mile tunnel.
I'm pretty sure that if they
That's
do
a
this,
lot.
it's not going to fix the traffic in Toronto.
No.
No, it's just it's again, I explain this to people all the time, like induced demand, where if you just make more lanes, it just makes more people drive.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there's more lanes, and I mean, LA is a perfect example of that. Like they just kept making the freeways bigger and bigger and bigger, and the traffic got worse. And you're just like, well,
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what lies in the heart of the people who live in Toronto. They're like, you know what? Fine, dig a hole.
Yeah. Well, let's just say, if I still lived in Ontario, I'm not someone that would have voted for Doug Ford.
Wow.
I thought he was the same guy. That's
No, it's his brother.
No.
I didn't realize the other guy had died. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that Ford guy's still around. Wow, didn't he get in trouble for some stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
He got in trouble and then he got cancer and died.
Oh, that's. I mean,
All right. Let's
all right.
talk about Stellantis.
Yes,
Oh
let's.
no, this is like a 34-mile tunnel for a car manufacturer.
Yeah. So Stellantis has had some issues in Europe and here in North America, but especially here in North America. Their market share is down by like 2 percentage points this year, I think, compared to last year. They've got a lot of excess inventory sitting on dealer lots. A lot of their vehicles during the pandemic period got way too expensive, and they've done some adjustments, but and most of their current product lineup is old,
Getting old.
really old. Like
Yeah.
They aimed real high during the lockdowns, like with pricing for those. Those Jeeps, those Wagoneers, and
Well, the Wagoneers and
Cherokees.
Grand Wagoneers ran into some production issues that slowed them down as well. Now, Grand Wagoneer, of course, getting over 100,000 was going to be a push, no
yeah,
matter what. But the Wagoneer pricing wasn't as crazy, and even in the last few months, I don't think they've really changed the pricing as much on those. But in the last year or so, with the production issues being solved, those have been steadily getting better and better. So at least there were new products. I think a bigger problem is that they just and Stellantis, whether it's Stellantis or FCA or whatever, that's been a thing the company keeps doing. They run out of money, and so they go, we'll just run that a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Well, why isn't anybody buying it? We need a new one. Okay. Let's, I mean, and that's simplistic, but it does seem to be something that the company in various iterations seems to get itself into this more than once. It's not the first time that you've looked at them. So maybe new cars would be good.
The Wrangler's 6 years old now.
Yeah.
It got a very mild refresh last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Gladiator, is almost as old.
Yeah.
The Compass, I think the current Compass came out in 2014 or 15.
I think we have a new
Yeah, there's a new one
that
coming.
thing even exists constantly. I'll see one. I'm like, oh god, yeah, the Compass. That's a thing.
Yeah, but Ram, same thing. The Ram 1500. They called it all new this year, but it's really a refresh.
Yeah.
It also came out in 2018.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have a bunch of new product coming,
right?
But like the Charger and the Recon and the Wagoneer S and various other things, but none of those are likely to address their pricing issues, and so now apparently Stellantis board has started looking at who might replace Carlos Tavares when his contract runs out in 18 months, if not sooner.
I think that the succession search and having a plan with the contract expiring is pretty standard. Mm-hmm. What's a little bit different is Jonathan Elkan's comments. Well, maybe we could go a different direction, or however he phrased it.
Yeah.
There's pressure on Tavares to fix things as well, and he's still in the running. They didn't say for sure they're going to replace him, but part of it is just you do that. You've got a contract that's up in 18 months. You do not wait until month 14 to be like, who's going to run this place, by the way?
But they also don't usually talk about it publicly.
No,
this is
I agree.
something that usually happens
I think
in the
that's
background.
what's a little bit different. And it's one of those things too that I think is interesting because they didn't make an announcement. They didn't call the reporter and go, hey, you know what you should talk about today? You should talk about me getting a new CEO. Instead, the reporter says, hey, what do you think? Do you think you're going to look at somebody new? And they're like, well, we're going to do a succession plan. We're going to, check everybody out. They would be remiss, even if things were going right. He's going to be, 66 at that time. They would be remiss not to consider doing something else, even if things were going perfectly. It is part of the board's job to say, is this the right direction? Is this the right person? And have that conversation. It doesn't usually necessarily get talked about. But again, Elkin answered a question. He didn't send out a statement. Mm-hmm. So he knows what he's talking about. He knows when he answers the question whether he's going to or not. So he chose to answer the question that he maybe at a different point might not have answered. And the question was asked because Stellantis is having trouble. So is this a chicken and egg thing? This thing is happening. It's big news that they're going to evaluate and open up the succession planning and review all of this, which is something they would do anyway. Are we making it news? The question was asked because they're struggling. And if everything was going great, would the reporter even notice that the contract was up? Would this even have been asked? So I feel like there's a little bit of speculation going on in there as well, more so than actual hard news that you review your CEO's contract when it's up. And he's not the 66 is ancient, but he's old enough that in some areas they would force him to retire. So you have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tavares, has been responsible, largely responsible for building the Stellantis that exists today.
Yes.
He came in, he took over as CEO of PSA, which was Peugeot Citroën group, about a decade, 12 years ago. And then, he purchased Opel and Vauxhall from GM, and then merged that whole mess with FCA to create Stellantis. Mm-hmm. And, now they're trying to figure out, what to do with Stellantis going forward. How do they get all these 14 brands back on track?
And it's an interesting thing to watch too. When he started off, he had said every brand's got a decade to make sure they're where they need to be. And some of them were in better shape at that point than they were than others. So not every brand was having trouble at that point. But that was the discussion. And we've had, Stellantis was formed, through COVID. So they don't have the excuse that they didn't know COVID was going to happen because, it kind of did.
Yeah. Well, I think the process started before.
The process started
pre-pandemic, but yeah.
But the company was formed in January 21, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, they had to work through COVID to get that. So anyway, it was a little bit less of a surprise for them. But, we're 4 years in, so we're not a full product life cycle for the whole brands, right? Each brand that had 10 years hasn't refreshed all their products yet.
Yeah.
So part of it's growing pains. Part of it is, you have to, it's good on paper to say we've got 14 brands now, we've got huge scale, so we should be able to refresh things faster. We should be able to be more effective with our capital allocations than we were before. And write it down on paper, and from the outside to go, okay, it's been 2 years. How come it's not fixed yet? And it's a big company, and it's a lot of things to move. And in the meantime, Carlos Tavares has been very vocal and very aggressive, and he has managed to annoy almost everybody who cares about the company. I feel
dealers, the union, and they've been playing musical chairs with the executives, especially here in North America. They've had 4 CEOs of Jeep in the last 2.5 years, and same with Ram. So there's been a lot of turnover.
And that's that. Whether some of that was natural, whether it was, so however that comes when you have that much turnover, it does disturb everyone in the process. It shakes things up a little bit. And, when I've been in the room listening to Tavares, he's, I like that he sort of speaks his mind or whatever. And some of the stuff that he says makes perfect sense to me. But in the process, he's managed to annoy everyone. Almost, and he's just going to have to work through that. So if you annoy everyone, you better make sure it works.
Yeah.
And some of the moves and some of the changes in terms of platform, in terms of going to extended range, and to electric and plug-in hybrid, some of those choices in these cars that aren't going to be on sale in any sort of volume for the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to figure it out in 28. He'll be gone one way or another, before you know how effective it really is. Right now it's difficult. And he's just in that position. I mean, the UAW is mad, the dealers are mad, people in Europe are mad. He's not fond of tariffs, but if he had tariffs, it would affect Leap Motors. So there's that. He's refreshing and he's interesting. But there's struggles.
Well, one of the things that was interesting at the Investor Day earlier this year was, he talked about, with the facilities that they've got in North Africa and Morocco and in Turkey, they can actually approach Chinese levels of cost.
Yep.
So, even if if the tariffs impact Leap Motors, they could potentially, start building those vehicles, in North Africa or in Turkey, and still have a lot of the same cost advantage they would have from getting those vehicles from China.
And those are things that he's putting in place that will take another 7 or 8 years to really, because you've got to get Leap Motor up. You've got all the things you have to do to have a new brand. And some of the North American powertrain changes are going to take a while to really figure out how well they're going to work. So yeah, he's bold. Yeah,
we'll have to see what happens. Nearer term, like a lot of other automakers, Stellantis, Volkswagen, Ford, has already talked about doing more hybrids. GM has said they're bringing back more hybrids. Stellantis and Volkswagen are planning to add some hybridization to their lineups. Jeep has plug-in hybrids in the Wrangler and the Grand Cherokee, but they want to have more affordable options too. And I think it would be pretty straightforward for them to take, what they've already got, do a smaller battery, a smaller electric motor, and just make those non-plug-in hybrids and offer those in those and other vehicles. And then at the automotive, did you go to the Automotive News World Congress this week? Okay.
No.
I guess Pablo Deci, who's the head of VW Americas. Yeah, he talked, and VW's talked about adding hybrids to the lineup previously, and he confirmed, that they will have hybrids here within the next 2 years, including in the Atlas, but also potentially in other models where they already have hybrids and plug-in hybrids overseas. So maybe the next generation Tiguan is one that sounds like it's likely to get a hybrid, which in that market segment, against vehicles like the RAV4. Hybrid, the CRV, the Escape, and the Hyundai Tucson and Santa Fe, and
pretty much everyone else. To be honest, like the fact that Volkswagen doesn't have a hybrid here is just sort of like.
I think it's basically Volkswagen and Nissan are the only ones that don't have any hybrids in that segment right now.
Yeah.
Oh, Chevy, yes.
Chevy.
So hybrids are coming. I mean, so since consumers are not going to EVs as fast as some mythical thing thought it should happen, some sort of collective drugs we were all on, I don't know, that's not happening. And even if it were, there's still not everybody's going to make the changes quickly enough, use cases, all the stuff we've talked about at different points on the show, right? So you still have emissions requirements to meet. Hybrids were happening. Electrification is the only way to meet the whether it's a full BEV or something in between. The only way to get to the regulations that we're facing is electrification. The question is how much, and so I think it's inevitable. I think it's not a surprise. I don't think it's so much that these automakers are suddenly getting smart. It's just a bit of reality. But I will throw this out for us. I was looking at this the other day. So right now, hybrid electric vehicles are a Toyota story, every bit as much as electric vehicles are a Tesla story. January to July of 2024, our registrations, our S&P Global Mobility Light Vehicle registrations, Toyota had 50% of the hybrids sold. 50%. In January to July of 23, they were at 51%. They had 68% growth. So Honda's growing, Ford's growing, Hyundai's growing, Lexus, everyone is growing in their hybrids, but it's still a Toyota story, and it's still about Toyota having really the broadest lineup, and Toyota showing the way. Not only have they had decades to get it to a cost competitive level for themselves, they finally figured out how to go to market. I say finally because they figured it out like 3 or 4 years ago. Not that they did it yesterday. It's about the Signia that we were talking about earlier. You just put it in and it's priced. Right. It's priced in that package. The RAV4 has 5 different powertrains in it and the hybrid doesn't, it's not a cost penalty. It gives you a little bit more fuel efficiency. It's an easy choice to make. A lot of things had to come together in order to get there. Part of it was technology development and cost and all of that. So that's where they're at. And Honda is going all in and saying we're gonna push harder. So they're already more.
Half of CRV and Accord.
Half of CRV and Accord.
Yeah,
are hybrids, and they're doing really well. So it's not, but it's also what they're kind of pushing out there. And I think it doesn't mean the other automakers won't do hybrids well, but I think if we talk about a buyer who just kind of comes in and says, I want to get a car tomorrow, and you go in and the RAV4 hybrid is there and it's priced right and it's in that thing, you just like, okay, fine, cool, let's go with it. Same with CRV. If you go into the Honda dealership and you haven't really thought about a hybrid one way or another before you walked in the door, and the salesman says, you've got this hybrid here and you've got this gas here, and they're $200 off from one another, or maybe there isn't a gas one on the lot, and you're like, oh, I'll try the hybrid anyway. So I have a feeling there's a lot of buyers who are just taking it right now and accepting it, and not unhappily. I don't mean to say that they're getting a product that they don't want and that they aren't going to be happy with. But I think there's a little bit more of that happening than somebody going, okay, checkbox, it has to be a hybrid before I'm going to buy it. Or I'm looking for a hybrid. I think they're looking for
just an easy sell.
It's just an easy sell.
This is a few $100s more, which means over the length of your lease or your thing, you're going to pay like $5, $10, $20. But you're going to save this much on gas. And the person's like, well, I'm just getting this.
You don't have the hassle of trying to figure out where you're going to charge it.
Yeah.
Right. It's easy to do.
You're like, oh no, the charging infrastructure is crazy, this, that. I don't want to put a charger at my house. And you're fine. And just like, oh, okay, I'm going to get some extra gas mileage. Fine, I can go do the thing I want to do.
it. And it's easy. But one of the things that's happening is we in general, this hype cycle thing seems to not ever slow down in this country. Whether we're talking about cars or anything else right now, that's just where we live. So the hype right now is that mythical. Everyone wants wants hybrids now. So everybody's got to get fast on their hybrids. And the reality is automakers need hybrids to meet regulations. And as long as it's an easy sell, consumers will take it. Some consumers are like predisposed to consider a hybrid right now because it is part of the conversation. But I don't think there's a deep well of people that are just like, yeah, that's it. Hybrid is what I want right now. That's where I'm going. It's a combination of things coming through. So it's not a surprise to me to see a bunch of brands go, okay, we're gonna get this handled and step in. But I also don't think that because Toyota is kicking it and killing it, and Ford is growing some as well, it means there's a deeper demand for it. I think it's just a better acceptance. So as long as you come to market with the right hybrid, you'll be fine. Yeah, but it's more about a common acceptance than it is a deep dive demand.
It was very funny. Like 6 months ago, I was like, "Oh, PHEVs! Everyone's going to be buying PHEVs now." And then I look at you. Then you look at the numbers. Like, what are you talking about? Like EV sales are higher than PHEV sales. Like,
yeah,
I mean, sure. I mean, the Wrangler 4xe does well.
Yep.
Yeah,
but everything else,
the Jeeps do well because in ZEV states like California and Washington, Colorado, the other states that follow California's ZEV mandate, zero emission vehicle mandate, dealers in those states are only allowed to order plug-in hybrids for stock.
I think they changed that, Sam.
Did they change it?
Because I drove by our Jeep
was
dealership, and it's a bunch of different Jeeps. I'm like, because I was curious about that. Yeah. But yeah, the Jeep dealership down the street from my house has all the Jeeps.
All the Jeeps. Yeah, that was an interesting story how that happened, I thought. With that scenario, California wasn't letting Stellantis be part of the framework that 5 or 6 automakers signed up for, and for whatever reason, FCA tried to get in, but tried to get in a month too late, so California wouldn't let them in, and then they turned to Stellantis, and California still wouldn't let them in. So that meant that the only plug-in hybrids that could count toward the California ZEVs were the ones sold in those 15 states. So Jeep went to that policy, and it wasn't a couple months after that California let them in. Okay. So there was a little bit, and so now all of plug-in hybrids will count toward the California ZEV mandate. So now they can spread them out a little bit better. But there was a little bit of a fight between California and Stellantis that got resolved, and that would enabled it. And while that fight was happening, that's exactly what Stellantis did. They said, nope, PHEVs only delivered automatically. If you wanted a PHEV,
customers could order one. They could order a regular gas model if they wanted, but the dealers were only allowed to, for a while, were only allowed to order the plug-ins.
Yep, exactly, and that definitely happened. But I think they've changed that, and there was a regulatory thing going on behind that.
Well, I mean, it certainly helped, Stellantis get to a point where they had the 2 best-selling plug-in hybrids in the country, and
they still do.
Yeah.
I like the 4xe. It's still a Jeep.
I like it
still,
just
and
it's loud. It drives weird. It's a Jeep.
And when you add the tax credit, the price differential to a gas equivalent is not that much. So it made sense for a lot of people.
So we have some storage plugins, because I was looking at hybrids the last week or two, right? So our data shows that there are 50 plug-in hybrid models available right now. And the top 5 account for 56% of those sales.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's about right. And it's Wrangler, Grand Cherokee, RAV4, Pacifica, Hornet, and Mazda CX-90.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. After a Mazda CX-90 was about 9,500 registrations between January and July. And the Hornet was about 10,500. But really, Wrangler was almost 40,000, and Grand Cherokee was about 22, and Toyota RAV4 was 20. So it's an interesting thing, and yeah, Jeep has done a good job of at least keeping themselves in that space, which they can use that. Mm-hmm. They can use that as they continue the story for the company, and whether they go hybrid or plug-in hybrid or EREV or however they expand, they can go, hey, look, guys, we're doing this already.
Well, I think the EREV Ram is going to be really interesting to watch when it comes out. I have a feeling that's probably going to outsell the BEV when it comes out, because it's probably going to be cheaper. Mm-hmm. And it for what a lot of people want a pickup truck for, which is towing, it's going to be a much better solution for a lot of people.
I think so. Yeah. I'm super interested in seeing how that plays in the market. I have, especially for big vehicles, extended range hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, for small vehicles,
or extended range battery electric. Yeah. Excuse me, extended range electric seems to be a really smart solution. And in some ways, it's cheaper than a PHEV because you don't have to have the engine affecting the wheels. Mm-hmm. So the complexity of the system is not as great as with a plug-in hybrid, where you have to manage whether the battery is driving the wheels or whether the engine is. With the extended range electric, the engine never goes near the wheels, and so it's less complicated, and you can make a lot of different choices. in
And
that.
because of the way you're using the engine itself can actually be simplified. They don't need a lot of the accessories that are hanging off of there. So the whole thing, you can take a surprising amount of cost out of it, even for what on paper may seem like a more complex system.
Yeah.
And it's more complex than a BEV, but it's less complicated than a standard plug-in hybrid.
Yeah, it's. I don't know why they have to put the V6 in there, but I think they just have extras lying around.
Well,
No, it works.
The
It works.
Pentastar, has been built for so long, that it's
I think the
fairly cheap for them to build,
Just like, meh.
and you need a certain amount of power, to provide enough juice to the battery to keep it going, for a vehicle that size.
But I mean, 100 was it 20, 23, 124, just around town.
Yeah.
EV range.
140, I think was what they're saying.
You're never, unless you, and again, unless you're going towing or you're going on a long trip. But
now you can tow 300 plus miles with that thing, compared to like 200-ish is the best for the big battery version of the Silverado, and 100 for a Cybertruck or a Lightning, or a Rivian. So it's, if you're going to tow long distances, you're going to tow a big camper, that is a much better solution for those use cases.
Oh no, it's I think it's really smart of them, and I think it's what that market will accept.
Yeah.
I think that's what the other thing is. I don't think the market, again, the F-150 Lightning to me is the best F-150 for like 90% of people who want an F-150, but that's not what that market wants to accept. They don't want that. They want vroom vroom truck.
Yeah.
They want to be able to say, well, what about towing? I'm like, do you ever tow? Well, I might.
What would you buy a truck if you didn't think you might tow?
Yeah, and they're like, I'm going to be hauling things. What?
Something. I don't know what.
There are at least 3 people, three households in my neighborhood that have like big, giant camper trailers that they tow around, and they've got, full-size pickup trucks that they use to tow that. Lots of people with boats. Lots of people with boats and stuff like that.
Sure.
Most of the trucks in my neighborhood, except for like 1 or 2, are like contractors or landscapers. Like a lot of contractors and landscapers in my neighborhood. And then one guy with a big road
better off
dozer,
with the
F-150, like, what are you doing?
With the Lightning.
Yeah, they just have the truck that they've had for like 10, 15 years that they just keep running.
Yeah.
It's got the big cage on and everything.
So before the conversation in the last few months, we were talking about PHEVs getting more popular and all of that, and the conversation of do PHEVs teach people how to go electric? I think range extenders are what teach people how to go electric, especially in that environment. I think and it'll take a decade to decide if I'm actually right or wrong, but I see this huge possibility for these full-size EREV trucks. You pick one up, and right now, maybe, the second or third car in your household is still a gas car. But when you drive that around for 2 or 3 years and you realize, to your point, that 140 miles getting around town is easy and you don't really need any more than that on a day-to-day life, then 4 years later, you're going to replace that second car, or you're going to get another car for your kid, or you're going to do something else. And you've got this different experience with electric, and you learn that you don't need 300 miles range. And you learn that 200 is just fine. And you've already incorporated that on this part of your life. And it opens up not only people being willing to accept and consider EVs, but I think it has a potential to get them to understand and learn what they really need versus what you're afraid you need right now, where we're at. So
once they realize, I can save X amount of dollars every month. I just plug my car in. I just plug my truck in. And trucks are very expensive to drive. When gas was like $7 a gallon here in California, and I would see dudes flying down the street with their dozer F-250s raised with tiny little wheels, just doing like 90 on the freeway. I'm like, do you know how much you're paying in gas for that? I was just like, that's insane.
It was easier than selling it and getting rid of it.
Yeah, I guess. But the idea that you're like, I can save a ton of money just cruising around town, and I just plug it in every night. And then, yeah, it changes your idea of like, oh, I haven't used the gas in my car in like 8 months.
Yeah. So I think there's an opportunity there for that to, at least for that buyer. Let's say it doesn't change the entire world's opinion, but I think it can change the opinion of some of those buyers. And it can be one of the things that really helps you understand what you really need from your next EV, even if you consider that. So there's some good potential there, I think, with that solution. So I'm curious to see how it executes. Can't wait to drive it and get it in the market. It's going to take a while. They're going to come on slow, and it's still a push for a minute. But I'm curious, really curious to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this vehicle.
Yeah,
because I think it's a smart way to do what truck people want.
Well, and I think another interesting use case for the E-Revs is going to be, Ford, when they announced earlier this summer that they were not going to build a 3-row EV at their Oakville, Ontario plant, but instead are going to build more Super Duties. And they mentioned kind of in passing that there's going to be electrified versions.
Yeah.
I'm 99.99% sure that those are going to be E-Revs. And because there's a lot of use cases for Super Duties, because Super Duties encompass everything from an F-250 to like F-550 chassis cabs, and a lot of those get converted. They're used for tow trucks, they're used for ambulances, they're used for bucket trucks that utilities use, and a lot of those use cases, you look at a bucket truck, a utility bucket truck, those things go out to a job site, and today, they're sitting there, the crews going up on the pole, doing whatever they need to do. And those things are sitting there idling that whole time. And with an E-Rev, they could actually drive it to the site using, actually with the engine running to keep the battery charged. And then when they get there, now they can do all the stuff off the battery and not have to idle that thing, which is hard on the engine. It's a lot of emissions. And, so they can do all that work, a lot less noise, when they're working in a neighborhood, and have, that sort of application. I think that makes way more sense. Those are the kinds of use cases where E-Revs are going to be huge.
Yeah. It's cheaper. It's especially for fleet managers who are like, wait, if I just charge these vehicles at night, the guy comes in, the gal comes in, they plug their truck in, they come in the next day, they drive around, they do their stuff, they use the bucket, and they're like, oh, I'm saving money, and I don't have to like track all this like crazy, like, okay, who paid for gas? Someone didn't bring their car, and they are going to have to pay for gas, but it's going to be less. I think for fleet managers, are like, oh, the premium's going to probably be totally worth it.
It should be. And I think another thing to think about too is where we can see these opportunities, which are there, we're thinking about it with the technology that we know. And I think both Ford and Toyota have indicated that nobody's standing still. So there's more evolution and more direction on E-Rev and on hybrid. There's more technology that's being developed, and they think they're going to be able to do it faster and with different variables than what we have now. And I think we're going to start to see some of those variables when these finally come out. So it's exciting that we can see that opportunity, not even knowing what they really got under the hood yet, because those engineers aren't just sitting around going, how do I put that engine in here? They're trying to come up with a bit of a new system as well, and build on what exists. So I think in 27 and 28, we'll see something. There's opportunity to see something really exciting along these lines.
All right, let's get two more stories. One quick one, another hybrid related thing. There's been a couple of reports out this week that the new Honda Prelude, which was shown last year at the Tokyo show and then at LA, it's gonna be a hybrid, but there's reports that it could have a manual transmission. What do you think? Do you remember the last manual transmission Honda built? Manual transmission hybrid Honda built, the CRZ?
The CRZ, that's right. Yeah, that didn't last very long.
No.
But that was a weird, wonky package.
Yeah, it was.
I think that I'm not allowed to say what I was going to say. Never mind. Sorry. I had some information. I was like, oh, wait, I'm not allowed to say this. This is the part of working at SAE where I'm like, oh, wait, nope, stop. Never mind.
Yeah. All right. We'll let you off the hook.
Anyway, maybe, sure. That's my. It seems like a fun, weird, complex problem that the people at Honda would love to tackle.
Yeah.
How's that?
Well,
I think they love tackling. The engineers at Honda love tackling something weird.
Yeah.
And this is
Well, the CRZ was, it was Honda's old IMA, really mild hybrid system. And with the manual, I think that car, the CRZ with like a Civic Si engine in it would have actually been great.
Mm-hmm.
But with that powertrain in it, it didn't work. And I'll be curious to see what they do, if this is somehow derived from their modern 2-motor hybrid system, how they managed to work a manual transmission in that. And maybe what it ends up being is a simulated manual, kind of like what, Hyundai's doing, and what Toyota is, reportedly working on as well, where you have a manual shift lever, and it's still an ECVT, but it's programmed to behave like a manual transmission, and you're controlling when it shifts.
There's part of me that thinks it sounds really cool, but it also feels like a lot of effort.
Yeah.
For
not many units that they'll probably sell.
Not many units, but it does speak to the fact that all the stuff you were talking about, the Ioniq and Ioniq 5N earlier, that there is more to the connection of driving, and there's more senses involved, and some people still do want to be part of that. The question's, how many, and is it worth it? So it's very curious. And think about it this way. Another thought: if they are looking at this challenge, I think the last NSX was not hybrid, or not manual, but maybe that's part of it too. Maybe they're looking at what you do with other projects. So maybe it's solve it here and take that knowledge and put it somewhere else too.
Yeah, that's a possibility, because they are apparently working on a next generation NSX, which is probably going to be electric. Yeah.
So I don't know where else they're going to put it, but that's the other sort of side of these things. When you go down these engineering and research paths, maybe it's not just one product that'll actually benefit from the project and from what they learn.
Yeah, but maybe if it is just a software manual, where you have a traditional manual shift lever instead of paddles, but it's all just manipulating software.
And eventually they're going to have a new Civic Type R. Maybe it's 7 or 8 years from now, but you got to do something. At some point that gets addressed too. So.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies are looking at the Hyundai Ioniq 5N right now, and they're like,
we could do something fun. We could do something interesting.
Yeah, we can do some interesting things. I think there's a lot of people who are like, EVs are meh. I'm like, well, have you driven any? Well, no, not really, but I'm like, oh, come on.
Well, in Charger Daytona, I've driven them, and I say, meh. Sometimes I say, meh.
Well, some of them are like, I had a whole thing about the Nissan Leaf. I'm like, it's fine. It's the most boring EV you can drive. But you know what? Get you where you need to go. If that's and most people don't really care about fun. You just want to get to work.
All right, last item. ACMI, which is a testing company based in California, recently did a bunch of testing with a Tesla with the latest version, two most recent versions of FSD software, 12.5.1 and 12.5.3. They ran 1,000 miles over 4 different types of roads, on highways, city streets, mountain roads, and rural 2 lanes. And they had a lot of issues with it. On average, drivers had to intervene over 75 times, an average of once every 13 miles, which for something that is supposed to be full self-driving, if you look at, Waymo and other, automated driving companies, they are going tens of thousands of miles between interventions.
Yeah.
This is going every 13 miles. And
feels like Blue Cruise.
yeah. Although, at least Ford, doesn't make any pretense
exactly
that fully self-driving.
Yes, that's true.
But the challenge here, is that they said that, in the first few minutes of driving, it's usually amazing, and it's almost magical in how well it works. But then it, will randomly do stupid things for no apparent reason. And we'll often do those things in the same scenarios where an hour ago it worked just fine. Because it works so well when it does work, that, it becomes very easy to get complacent. And then when you actually do need to take control, it's, you're not ready for it. At least, most normal drivers aren't. Tesla is supposed to launch their robotaxi in a couple of weeks.
Well, they'll have their robotaxi event in a couple of weeks. To me, that's a completely different.
Yes.
Tesla's supposed to launch something, and Tesla has an event. They're two completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually not that related. Yeah.
But they, back in, was it 2016 or 17, when they were trying to buy Solar City, Musk had a big event. He did it on, I think the Universal backlot or Paramount backlot, where it
was Warner Brothers.
Well, Warner Brothers is where they're doing this one. It was a different one for the Solar City thing. And he announced the solar roof tile.
No, it was Warner Brothers. It was a Warner Brothers lot.
Are you sure? I thought
maybe it was Universal.
Yeah, because they're using the Warner Brothers.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It was Universal.
They've got their cars running around the Warner Brothers lot doing detailed mapping. My guess is I would bet that, whatever we see on October 10th is, going to be very much running on rails with no other traffic around, and probably with remote operators monitoring it continuously and taking control at various times that, that they won't tell us about. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if the whole thing is even remotely driven.
Yeah, could be.
It's, that's one of the things. Like, I always tell people, I'm like, a lot of these have like these remote drive, and I ask these companies, they're like, oh yeah, well, we have somebody. I'm like, are they driving, or are they telling the car? Are they saying, okay, you can do this now? And so, because no one asks these people that, they don't ask about the remote driving. And because I've talked to the remote driving companies, they're like, yeah, we would do the work for these people and these people and these people and these people.
Yeah.
And, and robotaxis, again, it doesn't make financial sense. It's not there's no, it's a good 5 to 10 years before those things are profitable, because of all the stuff that has to happen in the background in order to make these things happen. And so I don't know. It's I'm actually going to the event. I got invited.
Oh, did you really?
Oh.
I know. So there'll be something on SAE about this. I got an invite, which is very strange, because I know the certain CEO doesn't really like me. But there you go. So yeah, I'll go there and I'll look at it, and we'll have the caveats that Musk typically says things are going to happen and they don't happen within that timeline, which is about he doesn't have a very good track record for that, and there's always things that we're not told about these systems, because a lot of these companies are they're trying to keep the stockholders happy. They're trying to boost their stock. They're trying to get more money to do the thing that is, again, incredibly difficult. So yesterday, I'm driving back from northern California, and we're on a 2-lane road, and they're doing construction. One lane is down, and they have a red light and a green light. After 6, Well, when we got there, the red light was on, but there was a construction worker there who was waving people through. Even though he had the stop sign up, he was waving people through with their hands. Like, okay, go, go, go. Everyone understood what was going on. Like, oh, the guy's telling me to go, even though there's a red light, and he's holding a stop sign in his hand just because, he's holding it. They knew that they could go because the person was waving them. There's no self-driving car right now from Waymo or whoever that would have understood that scenario.
Yeah.
That would just been the end of it. And these are companies that they have these systems deployed in cities. They're running, but it's like these edge cases, just things that you come up against as a driver, probably once or twice a week, that you don't really think about because as a human you have the knowledge and the the experience of like, oh, I can go, or I should go around, or this is something, oh, maybe I should wait, that robot cars just don't have. And that's a very, very, very difficult problem to solve, and no one has been able to solve it, and it's going to be a long time before they do. And I don't care how much you say AI is going to do it. AI sucks up so much energy. It's so expensive to run right now that it's not going to be this super fix, especially when you look at LLMs and you're like, those aren't even that great.
Yeah.
These aren't great at all. And now we're going to like trust the same sort of systems to run cars, like
Yeah, not quite. And then, we've talked about the challenges with the business model in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are the cars where they need to be? What do they do when they're deadheading? That the business model is very difficult.
Right. And this is
even
something
if the technology works.
I've written about for better part of a decade, that even if you get the technology working, there's going, I remember, back in 2016 when Travis Kalanick, the former CEO of Uber, talked about, we've got to get self-driving cars so we can get rid of the human drivers, and then we'll suddenly magically be profitable. It's like, no, because you're going from an asset light model where Uber doesn't own any vehicles. They don't have to take care of them or do any of the maintenance or insure them. They're just paying money to drivers who are then paying out of their pocket to maintain their vehicles. And now you've got to build or buy hundreds of thousands of vehicles if you want to operate on the scale you're operating on now. You've got to have depots where you charge these things. You've got to clean them. When somebody throws up in the car or leaves something behind, the car's got to go back to the depot to get cleaned. There's all kinds of challenges, and that is going to add huge amounts of cost. I mean, this is why Ford gave up on Argo AI, because they recognized they were making a lot of progress in the technology, but they knew that they were not going to be able to build a profitable business this decade. Mm-hmm. And they said we need to spend this money somewhere else.
Right now, an Uber driver, if they are running out of gas, just goes to wherever.
Yeah.
If they're running out of charge, they just go wherever, and they do. They refuel.
They just take care of it. If the car gets dirty, it's their problem.
Yeah, they just go and they
Uber
do whatever.
Pay for it.
If it's an autonomous vehicle and it's running out, it has to hold on. We got to go back to the depot, and either they have an automated system or they have a person. And if it's gas, it's likely a person. If it's an EV, then there's a bunch of other stuff that you could do. There's wireless charging that's finally like makes sense, and some some of those weird robots that stab the car with the charger. But all that is infrastructure, all that is space, all that is, and the idea that like, oh, we're just gonna like just throw the autonomous cars on the road and it's gonna be fine. I'm like, oh, there's so much. It's so expensive. It's so incredibly expensive to make these things work. And they're just like, oh, no. But they don't talk about that because for the shareholders, just the autonomous cars, the future.
Well,
yay.
Yeah, and you have financial people like Adam Jonas at Morgan Stanley and Kathy Wood that say, all of a sudden, you're going to flip a switch on the software and people are going to be making $30,000 a year from their Tesla driving around giving rides to people. Just it's ridiculous. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I still have not wrapped my head around that as a business model. I mean, you really do have to be like, I don't need my car today. Yeah. I'll just let somebody else drive it or have it drive them. And
while you're at work, have your car go out and make money for you, or while you're sleeping.
And that's the sort of the dream, but they don't. No one lays out, especially when they're talking to shareholders, and the shareholders don't think about it because they just think, oh, we don't have to pay people. The car will just do it themselves. And the reality is that there's so much going on around that vehicle that has to happen, infrastructure-wise, technology-wise. And you still need remote pilots who can like log into the car when it gets confused, because it's going to get confused out in the real world. But no one talks about that. No one shares that information when they're standing in front of a big crowd of people, a lot of shareholders, and saying, we're going to have robo-taxis, Mark Fields, 2019, we're going to have robo-taxis. And well, it's 2024 now, and 5 years later, Mark's over at Hertz now, I think.
No, he's gone from there too.
Oh, no.
I don't know what he's doing these days, but
I remember just sitting there
firm or something.
Yeah, I remember being I'd already written about autonomous vehicles, and if you're more than 6 months in, suddenly you see all the issues and all the things that have to happen in order for these things to work, or you're just sort of checked out and you just keep believing the hype, which is unfortunate. So maybe you shouldn't be covering this. And so it's such a hard. And again, I would love it if there were autonomous cars because, my mom can't drive. She's sick. There's a lot of people who just want to go to work.
Yeah.
But a lot of these, and especially in some areas where there isn't public transportation, which, by the way, we should just have more public transportation. That solves like most of the problems that autonomous cars are supposed to solve.
It's just as expensive though. That's the problem.
You get like 7 people on a, 12 people, 80 people on a bus, and you can go to the thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I'm here at the place. Or we have a bunch of cars and now we still have traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Autonomous cars.
I'm waiting.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, again, it'd be cool, especially in like rural areas where there just doesn't make any sense to build up. Where I'm from, it doesn't make sense to build an infrastructure for public transportation because it just doesn't work in a small town like that.
It doesn't. It doesn't work here.
What you need is a mix of autonomous shuttles and buses and trains to serve different regions, but they're all interconnected as part of a larger transit ecosystem. Yeah.
Like I would love a car that just takes me to BART, and then I can just take BART to the airport. Easy peasy. I don't have to fight with traffic. I don't have to deal with anything. And just boom, I'm at the airport. And every city that doesn't have any sort of tram or train system from the airport is failed. And I'm talking to you, Detroit, because every time I fly to Detroit, I'm like, I'll jump on forget it. I'm going to Detroit. I got to rent a car.
Yeah.
Because nobody's out at the airport. You're not. Where
no one flies to the airport. No one flies.
Yeah, the density is still a problem for trams and for public transit.
Yeah.
And that's one that's as hard to solve as the idea of having a depot for your autonomous vehicles. And in areas where like here where we really don't have enough density to have good. I don't think to have good, solid public transportation, we're also used to just being able to do what we want to do when we want to do it. And I think that's where things start to fall apart. I could see a scenario where if they ever get affordable enough, where you use an autonomous vehicle within a family and instead of 3 cars, you have 2, because you can have your autonomous kid to, take your kid to some event after school and then come pick you up from work. Like there's family dynamics where I think there might be some opportunity, but that's not making anybody money other than selling the car.
And that's not happening for a long time.
And that's not happening for a long time.
Yeah,
that's forever away. Not forever, but that's, you've got to do something else way before that. But, I'm if I could get myself convinced to just like let somebody take my car for the day, I have a hard time imagining that it would be enough days to actually be worth my while.
Well, the scenario that's more realistic is something like Turo. With Turo, it is nominally a peer-to-peer, car rental service. But the reality is that very few of the people that put their cars on Turo are sharing, their daily driver. Yeah. Most of the people on Turo now are people that are buying or leasing cars specifically to put on Turo.
Yeah.
And in many cases,
friend who does that.
Yeah. In many cases, they have multiple cars.
Yeah. They have purchased multiple cars to put on Turo.
So they're basically running, small rental company
little rental
of their own.
Yeah.
And their Turo is just providing a platform to connect renters with the people that own the vehicles. But and in a lot of cases, the people that own the vehicles aren't even, they're not taking care of the maintenance. They're hiring another company that is taking care of cleaning and fueling the vehicles. So they hire somebody that does all that. So the original, the reality is not what the original plan was. And, it's going to be the same thing, if we did have automated vehicles. It would be people would buy a bunch of vehicles themselves and they'd have their own little private rental fleet.
Yeah.
And maybe that works.
Maybe
some picks and shovels,
but you got to get to the technology maturity first. And
you got to buy a big right now. Everybody go out and buy. Not right now. In 10 years, go out and buy a big parking lot, set it up with level 2, AC charging, and you can rent out space to all the robo taxis that still probably won't be on the road.
Probably not. And
hire some high school kids to just walk out and plug things in, and then unplug things.
So we're going to have more hybrids, and we all think EREV is a good thing, and we're not big on autonomous happening anytime soon.
No.
It's just so hard.
Yep. All right. Well, Steph, thank you for joining us again this week.
Thanks for having me on.
Always good to chat with you. And Robbie, we'll talk to you next week. And bye, everybody.
Bye.
What's up? Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.